Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, Cooking for the Family. I'm going to share with you how to make this lovely bread. This is a basic bread recipe with a little bit of a twist to it. These are the ingredients that we're going to be using: buttermilk, bread flour. You can also use regular all-purpose flour as well. So I'm going to walk you through how to make this luscious bread. I came across this recipe, had to share with y'all. I'll have all the ingredients and information in the description box below. So first I'm using some unsalted butter. I'm going to go ahead and melt the unsalted butter. While my butter is melting, and I'm also going to let that butter cool, we're going to get together our flour. And you see what I was doing with my spoon. We're going to aerate the flour and just spoon your flour into your measuring cup. This is going to keep us from having too much flour packed into our measuring cup. And if we end up having too much flour packed in, then our ratios are off and our recipe is off. Now, typically, it is always going to be best when you're baking with yeast breads, especially to measure or whether to weigh your ingredients. But you know what? You don't have to have a scale in order for it to come out great. And so just go ahead and spoon it in just like I did. So total with our flour, I'm using a medium-sized bowl. So with our flour, that was 3 cups. And now I'm also going to put in a half a cup. So total, we're using 3.5 cups of bread flour. And again, you can also use all-purpose unbleached flour if you don't have bread flour on hand. So to our flour, I'm also going to add some salt, and I'm using regular table salt, and this is 1 teaspoon of regular table salt. We're going to put in some yeast. I'm using active dry yeast, and I'm putting in 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast. Now, if you are going to be using the yeast packets, you can use the yeast packets, and each packet of a yeast is 2 1/4 teaspoons. And so you want to do your measurement that you end up coming up with 1 tablespoon. Okay, so once I have in the flour, the salt, and my 1 tablespoon of yeast, I go ahead, blend those together with my fork. I'm going to set that aside. I have my butter, which is now cooled and out of the microwave. And now in a large bowl, I'm going to put our wet ingredients. So in my bowl, I'm going to put some buttermilk. And for the buttermilk, we're going to be using 1.5 cups of buttermilk. Now my buttermilk, I took it out of the refrigerator, so my buttermilk is not ice cold. I let it sit on my countertop while I was getting the rest of the ingredients together and gonna start the video for y'all. So the buttermilk, you do not want to have your buttermilk ice cold when you're making this, so it can be just like on the countertop, which is fine. So again, this is 1.5 cups of buttermilk. Be sure to shake your buttermilk. Then to my buttermilk, I added in my melted butter, and the melted butter was unsalted, and that was 2 tablespoons of butter. And then I also added in some sugar, and that was 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar. Now in the description box below, I will have a list of all the ingredients you need to make this wonderful buttermilk loaf bread, but I'm also going to share with you and show you how to take those ingredients and put them together. So to my liquid, I'm going to add in the dry. Add in a little bit at a time. I like to add it in as fourths, okay? So 1/4 of the dry ingredients I add in, I mix it in, mix it around, add in a little bit more, mix it around just like I'm doing there until you have everything added into 1 bowl total. Now, if you are new to my channel, welcome in. And if you're a returner, welcome back. My name is Dyvonne, and on my channel, I love to share what I cook and bake for my family in my kitchen, share some stories here and there, some family recipes that I've come across over the years, and then just things that I enjoy making and baking. So if you enjoy that kind of content, I hope you consider subscribing. Once I have those things in my bowl, I go ahead, mix from bottom to top, just like I'm doing, and pressing. Now, we're going to be needing to add some additional buttermilk because we want to create a sticky dough. And so right now our dough is kind of dry, but you want to make sure that you have incorporated as much as the dry ingredients and as much as the liquid. So at this point, I go ahead and I switch from using my spatula to my hand, and I wanted to feel the dough to see the moisture level content, and I could tell that I needed a little bit more. So you definitely want to touch your dough and see like how dry it is, how wet it is. And so I added in a little bit more of the buttermilk. Now with the buttermilk, you want to add about a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons at the most, a little bit at a time. And always make sure that you're stirring and blending from the bottom, because that's where the flour settles. And so go from the bottom where it's typically going to be drier in the bowl to the top, so that way you can really kind of tell the consistency of your dough and what you're looking for, and if it's getting hydrated enough. So just a little bit at a time, and then I feel with my hands and I can really tell, okay, my dough is feeling like if I just move it around, it's going to really start to get more hydrated, the flour. And then also you can tell that your dough is going to be a little bit sticky, and that's what you want, because you want to create a dough ball inside your bowl, because you can go on and gather your dough and see how as I'm moving my hands, how the other flour is starting to come together and it's all turning into one big ball. That's what we're looking for. So when we get to that point, I go ahead, I set aside my bowl. On my countertop, you want to have a nice clean surface that you're working with. I'm going to use a little bit more of my bread flour to put down, so that way as I'm going to begin to knead my dough, that it's not going to end up sticking to your surface. Okay, so make sure that you just put maybe about a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons at the most. If you need to add a little bit more flour as you're kneading, go ahead and add that flour, but a little bit at a time. Now when it comes to kneading our dough, it's very important that you want to knead this dough for 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes for sure. You want to go ahead and knead the dough. The kneading is so important because it's going to work up all of that nice gluten that we need to have a nice wonderful texture and really get our yeast going in our dough. And so with kneading, you want to push using your palms. You're going to push your dough away from you, and then with my fingertips I gather it back to me. And so look at your clock, be mindful of the time, and be mindful of the 10 minutes. And so it's just going to be sticky, and you want to make sure your dough never dries out but does stay a little sticky, a little tacky. Is another word that kind of describes how it is. And then just fold it over, kind of like an envelope. You want to fold it over, push it away from you like that with your palms, gather it to you. Sometimes I just will use one hand, go back and forth like that, and just kind of, just get into your groove and moving your dough around. And your dough is going to also change in texture. It'll be a little bit sticky and rough at the very beginning, and then what's going to happen is it's going to start to smooth out. It's going to feel really nice, really pliable and smooth. You're going to have a nice dough ball shape. Now I take my bowl, the same bowl I used earlier, I went on and cleaned that out. I sprayed it with a little bit of this non-stick canola spray, put my dough ball in the middle. We're going to cover it with some plastic wrap, and we're going to let this rise in a nice warm place. My warm place that I'm going to have is going to be in my oven. What I like to do is I turn on my oven to about 250. Then I turn it off while I'm kneading my dough. And then I go ahead as my oven is off, but there's still just like a little bit of heat in the oven. Keep it closed. Let the dough rise for an hour until your dough is doubled in size. So your dough may be doubled in size after about 50 minutes. Your dough may be doubled in size after about an hour and 10 minutes, but around about an hour. So once my dough is doubled in size, I take it out of the bowl, and then we're going to knead it again. You see how beautiful this dough is looking. Oh my gosh, it feels so nice to the touch. And when your dough is feeling like this and it's nice to the touch, you have done a great job with that first kneading, and you have let it rise until it has doubled, and it is just feeling so good. And you can even see that it's just nice and pillowy soft, and that's going to make some nice pillowy soft bread. Now once I've just kneaded it, the second knead, you just want to knead it just really gently for just about a minute, okay? And then I'm going to take my rolling pin here, and we're going to flatten our dough. We're going to roll it out. We're not going to totally flatten it, but we're going to roll it out to just about a couple of inches in thickness, okay? Not super thin, just a couple of inches. You want it to be a couple inches thick. That once I do that, I go ahead, I folded it over. You see how I fold over almost like a burrito? I folded it over just like that. And then on the edges where I have the seam, I'm going to go ahead and press my seam. And then the ends, I folded it in. And so I stretched out a little bit, I folded in the ends, and then pinch the sides. You're going to go through, and I'm going to pinch the sides right here, pinch my seam. And so I folded it, I pinched the seams. On the ends, I folded my ends just like that. And so you have a nice loaf that you've created already that we're going to put in our loaf pan. This is a 9 by 5 by 3 loaf pan that I have lightly greased with some butter. And I had soft butter, I greased it. I'm going to use my same plastic wrap, going to cover our loaf, going to put this back in my oven, going to let this go ahead and rise for 35 to 45 minutes until it has doubled, and also the loaf will fill out into your loaf pan where you won't see any blank spaces on the side. The loaf will be totally filled in our loaf pan just like that. So it's doubled in size, and it also has filled into our loaf pan. My oven is preheating. I have my oven is preheating on 350 degrees, and our bread is going to bake at 350 for 30 to 35 minutes. So our bread is out of the oven. It is smelling so good. It smells so homey in the kitchen. So our bread has baked up. It has baked for 32 minutes. My loaf was nice, beautiful golden brown. It has risen nicely. You want to let this go ahead and cool in the pan for about 10 to 15 minutes. Now my pan is still warm, okay? And so what I do is I shake the loaf. And so when I shake it, I can feel it that it's going to lift right out. And so you want to do it quickly and just lift your loaf right out of the pan. It is still warm, and it is warm to the touch. We don't want to cut into it yet, but we do want to put a little bit of butter. So I let this cool for another 15 minutes. And so it's cooled down a bit, but it's still warm enough where I'm going to put a little bit of butter on. Now, I'm going to be baking some of these loaves because they come out so good. I'm going to be baking some of these loaves, putting them in a bread bag and giving them to family and to neighbors and to friends. Now, when I do that, I'm not going to brush it with butter, okay? But I'm brushing it with butter today because this is going to be for the family. I also have some of my homemade apple butter that I make in my crock pot. I will put the link to my homemade apple butter in the crock pot that I also made a bunch of these jars and gave them out to my friends and my friend groups and stuff. But we're going to have that with some of this buttermilk loaf that we made. Now I totally let our bread cool down. It cooled down significantly. You don't want to cut it when it's hot or too warm because then it does change the texture of the bread. So definitely let this cool down. It could be warm, but you don't want it to be too warm, okay? And so I went on and I cut us some. Look how beautiful our loaf is looking. It looks so good. I've cut us a piece and I'm going to put some butter on it. And if you'd like to see how I make my homemade English muffins and how I make my homemade flour tortillas, I will also put a link in the description box below with those vlogs. Well, I am getting your bite ready, making sure we have a nice bit of butter on that for you. Are you ready for your bite? Oh, look how nice it's looking. And it feels so good. Go ahead and take your bite. Now I'm going to take my bite and see how we did. Wow. Oh my gosh. The texture of this bread. It is just incredible. It comes out. Oh, you see that? It's just nice and soft. The buttermilk in there. My son, he sliced himself up some and made sandwiches with it. He made himself a ham sandwich. And so I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of our apple butter on this side so we can try a little bit of our homemade apple butter. Are you ready for a bite with our homemade apple butter? Go ahead and take your bite. We got apple and we have our cinnamon and nutmeg in there. Okay, let me take my bite and see how we did. Wow. Well, I hope you give this recipe a try. If you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, don't forget to show it some love, give it a thumbs up, click share this video with a friend or family, and click that notification bell so you can come back and visit me again in my kitchen and look for my Christmas vlogs, my 12 days of cookies and holiday treats starting this Friday. Well, that is it for me today. And remember, it's always good when Dyvonne is cooking for the family. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.